They called it the future of railroads, a 140-foot silver bullet that made the Union Pacific big boy look short. In 1939, at the World's Fair, the S1 ran 60 miles an hour on a treadmill, dazzling millions with promises of American dominance. But off the stage, this engineering marvel could not take a real corner. If beauty and power were enough, the S1 would have reigned supreme. Instead, its hidden flaw rewrote railroad history. The true story is uglier and far more revealing than the brochures ever admitted. The American Railroad's pavilion was built for spectacle, and the S1 delivered. Every morning, crowds surged past banners promising the locomotive of tomorrow. There, gleaming under the spotlights, stood 140 feet of polished steel, longer than anything Union Pacific ever dared. The S1 did not rest on a static pedestal. It roared to life on a custom-built roller rig, a treadmill engineered to fool the senses. Steam hissed, the massive 84-inch driving wheels blurred, and the whole machine vibrated as if straining to break free. Fairgoers packed the railings, craning for a glimpse. Schoolchildren pointed at the bullet nose, and businessmen boasted that only in America could you build a train this big, this fast, and this beautiful. Raymond Loewy's chrome lines caught the flashes of 1,000 cameras. Swing music from the fairground mixed with the steady rumble of the S1's simulated sprint. For hours on end, the S1 thundered in place, wheels spinning at a steady 60 miles per hour. Brochures claimed it could run all day, sometimes all week, without a hiccup. By the end of the fair's first season, the railroad's press office bragged about tens of thousands of simulated miles, all racked up without ever leaving the platform. The numbers were as dazzling as the chrome: 140 feet long, over 600,000 pounds, and a speedometer that never dipped below 60. The crowd did not see rails, they saw possibility. The S1 was more than a locomotive, it was a promise that the future would be faster, smoother, and more glamorous than anything that came before. The Trilon and Perisphere loomed in the background, but all eyes were on the machine that made even the big boy look ordinary. But there was something missing from this perfect picture. The roller rig was a straight shot, no curves, no switches, no station platforms to dodge. The S1's show was built for the spotlight, not for the real world. For now, it did not matter. The public was in love. Every day, the applause drowned out any doubts. The S1 was the star of the World's Fair, and for a brief moment, everyone believed the hype. Raymond Loewy didn't just design trains, he dressed them up for the runway. By the late 1930s, his name was stamped on everything from refrigerators to luxury liners, always with the same promise: the future would be fast, smooth, and beautiful. The Pennsylvania Railroad wanted that promise in steel. They handed Loewy a blank check and told him to make a locomotive that would stop the show at the World's Fair. The result was the S1, a machine so long it barely fit inside the pavilion, 140 feet from coupler to coupler, outstretching even the Union Pacific big boy by a full 8 feet. Loewy's patent sketches, number 2,128,490, showed a bullet-nosed front that looked like it could slice through the air. Chrome bands wrapped the boiler like jewelry. Every seam was hidden, every bolt tucked away under polished metal. The S1 was less a machine and more a sculpture, a rolling billboard for streamlined modern. Its sides gleamed under the spotlights, reflecting the fair's optimism in every curve. The design was pure theater, a locomotive that looked like it had been fired from a cannon, ready to leap into the next century. But all that glamour came with a price. The S1's sheer length was a statement, a dare to the rest of the railroad world. No other steam engine had ever been built this big. The big boy was famous for brute force and its articulated frame, a workhorse, not a beauty queen. Where the big boy's joints let it snake through mountain passes and tight yards, the S1 stood rigid, a single unyielding beam of steel. Loewy's vision did not bend for practicality. It demanded the biggest, the boldest, the most eye-catching silhouette on the rails. The S1's presence at the fair was a declaration: America could outbuild, outshine, and outpace anyone. The bullet nose, the endless chrome, the 140-foot span, all of it was meant to dazzle. Loewy knew exactly what he was doing. He gave the S1 a look that belonged on a movie poster, not in a roundhouse. The public ate it up. Photographers lined up for shots of the streamlined flanks. Brochures handed out Lowe's name alongside the S1's stats, tying fashion to horsepower. Underneath the polish, though, hid a challenge that no amount of style could erase. The S1's length was not just a number, it was a warning. Every extra foot made the locomotive harder to handle and less forgiving on the rails. Lowe's masterpiece was built to look perfect in the spotlight, but physics does not care about appearances. The longer the frame, the less it wants to turn. That truth sat buried under layers of chrome and optimism, waiting for the moment when the applause faded and the real work began. Beneath the chrome and glamour, the S1 was hiding something radical. Most steam engines of the era squeezed all their power through a single set of driving wheels. One big engine, one rhythm, all or nothing. The S1 split that power in two. It was a duplex, two separate engines, each with its own set of cylinders, both jammed into the same rigid frame. Up front, four massive 84-inch drivers pushed by their own pistons. A few feet back, another set of four did the same job. Instead of one burst of force every turn, you got two. The idea was simple on paper: double the power strokes, smooth out the delivery, and keep the wheels spinning clean at high speed. Less pounding on the rails, less wear on the track. In theory, it was a leap forward. No more hammering, no more walled surges. The S1 could glide at 100 miles an hour, the motion almost hypnotic, the sound less like a freight train and more like a turbine. The engineering pitch was all about efficiency. By splitting the work, you could use smaller, lighter parts. The rods did not have to be as heavy. The cylinders could be shorter. The whole machine, despite its size, was supposed to run smoother and last longer than the old single-engine monsters. The boiler fed both engines at once, pouring steam into a maze of pipes and valves. Each set of drivers grabbed the rails with its own rhythm, the front and rear engines working together but not locked in step. At speed, the effect was mesmerizing. The whole locomotive seemed to float, the wheels spinning so fast you could barely see the spokes. But there was a catch. By splitting the drive this way, the S1 created a new kind of problem: synchronization. The two engines were not physically linked, so if one set of drivers hit a slick spot or a patch of oil, it could start spinning out of control while the other set kept gripping. The front wheels could be skating, the rear wheels still digging in, and the engineer had to sense it all through the throttle and the vibrations in the cab. On a straight roller, with perfect traction, this setup looked flawless. Out on the rails, it was a different story. Still, on the fairground treadmill, none of that mattered. The S1 could run for hours, the duplex drive humming along, every piston firing in perfect time. The crowds saw a machine that was smoother, faster, and more advanced than anything before it. The brochures talked about innovation, about the future. The reality was more complicated. The duplex system was a gamble, one that looked brilliant under the lights, but would demand nerves of steel from anyone who had to drive it for real. 64 feet. That is how much of the S1's frame sat dead straight from the first driver to the last. No hinges, no joints, no forgiveness, just a single, unyielding bar of steel. On paper, that kind of length was supposed to mean stability at speed. In the shop, it meant headaches. Every inch added to the frame made the locomotive less willing to follow the rails around a curve. Most engines of this size, like the Big Boy, were built to bend. The Big Boy's articulated frame let it snake through mountain passes and switch yards, each half moving like a shoulder and a hip. The S1 had no such luxury. It was a rigid plank, and the rails had to bend for it, not the other way around. The numbers did not lie. The S1's wheelbase was longer than most city buses. On a straightaway, it tracked like a missile. But the moment it met a curve sharper than 15 degrees, the trouble started. The locomotive's overhang would swing wide, threatening to clip station platforms or scrape the ballast. In tight yards, the wheels would bind, metal grinding against metal, until something gave way. Even the Ys, those special track triangles built for turning engines, were often too tight. The S1's rigid geometry meant that it could not fit on most turntables. Crews had to plan elaborate detours, hunting for stretches of track wide enough to let the machine spin around. Every maneuver was a risk. Adhesion was another sore spot. With a locomotive this long and heavy, over 600,000 pounds, you would expect it to stick to the rails like glue. But less than half that weight sat on the driving wheels. The rest was carried by the 6-wheel leading and trailing trucks, designed to guide the S1's bulk but not to pull. That left the 8 drivers, 4 up front and 4 behind, to do the real work. The result was a low adhesion factor, barely enough to keep the wheels from slipping under load. If the rails were wet, or if the engineer got too eager with the throttle, the drivers would spin, steel on steel, and the S1 would lose its footing. The crew could dump sand on the rails and feather the controls, but there was no way to cheat the math. Too much power, not enough grip. The shop talk was blunt. The S1 was a straight bar problem. It was built for the parade, not the trenches. Every time someone asked why the big boy survived and the S1 did not, the answer was simple. The big boy could bend. The S1 refused. The longer it ran, the more the geometry fought back. Curves became obstacles, not connectors. Every mile off the fairground treadmill brought the S1 closer to trouble. The warning signs were there from the first day it touched real track. Physics does not care about chrome, and a rigid frame does not care about dreams. Wartime did not care about glamour. The S1 was yanked from the spotlight, shoved into the thick of the action, from Chicago to Crestline, hauling passenger trains packed with soldiers, mail, and wartime cargo. The schedules were tight, the loads were heavy, and the pressure was relentless. On paper, the S1's 76,400 pounds of tractive effort should have made it a hero. But out on the rails, the numbers did not add up. Less than half its weight pressed down on those 8 giant drivers. That left the S1 skating on the edge of disaster every time the rails turned slick. People loved the big boy because it worked. Crews dreaded the throttle. The duplex drive was supposed to smooth out the power. When the front set of drivers hit a patch of oil or frost, they would spin like a car on ice while the rear set kept clawing at the rail. The cab would lurch, the rods would rattle, and the engineer had to react fast, cutting steam, dumping sand, feathering the controls. It was like wrestling a bear that wanted to tear itself apart. Some days, the S1 would slip so hard it would throw itself out of sync, hammering the rods and threatening to snap its own insides. Every lost minute on the clock meant angry dispatches and missed connections. Yardmasters hated seeing the S1 on their sheets. If a curve was too tight, the whole train could jam the line. The big boy kept grinding up the mountains, ugly but reliable. The S1, beautiful as ever, was stuck fighting physics and the clock, every run a gamble between speed and chaos. The big boy survived because it could bend. The S1 could not, and that made all the difference. Retirement came for the S1 not with ceremony, but with silence. By 1946, the timetable stopped listing her number. She sat cold in the Crestline engine house, too long for the turntable, too rigid for the sidings, a monument to ambition with nowhere left to run. The paperwork was blunt. 1 locomotive, 140 feet, retired from service. No parade, no headlines, just a line in the ledger and a lock on the shop door. Meanwhile, the big boy, ugly and hinged, kept pulling trains across the mountains. 3 years later, the acetylene torches arrived. In 1949, the S1 was cut down piece by piece. Chrome panels were pried off, driving rods thrown onto scrap heaps, the bullet nose unbolted and hauled away for melting. There was no push to save her, no museum, no preservation society, no last-minute plea from the public or the boardroom. The steel was worth more as salvage than as memory. The big boy survived because it could bend. The S1, beautiful and rigid, was reduced to scrap for pennies on the pound. That is the final score. The big boy could bend, the S1 could not. In the end, physics kept the survivor and swept away the starlet. That is how the story ends for a machine built for the spotlight but doomed by the curve. In an era obsessed with spectacle, the S1 reminds us, even the boldest innovation falls when it ignores real-world limits. Today, technology giants still chase headlines with sleek prototypes that never reach the market. The big boy endures because it worked, the S1 vanished because it did not bend. Progress is not about beauty, it is about surviving the curves we never see coming. Share your thoughts below.